120 days into his presidency, Donald Trump has not resolved the war he said he could end in one day. So today in Ukraine, the aftermath of yet more Russian shelling in the city of Kherson. After speaking with Vladimir Putin for 2 hours yesterday, Trump believes there's an opening.
I think something's going to happen. It's a very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved, but I think something's going to happen.
The US president announced that Russia and Ukraine will immediately start ceasefire negotiations. However, the optimism was short-lived. Putin spoke of a memorandum on a possible future peace deal, but stood firm.
The question is that the Russian and Ukrainian sides should show maximum desire for peace and find compromises that would suit all parties. At the same time, I would like to note that the Russian position is clear. The main thing for us is to eliminate the root causes of this crisis.
The root causes for Putin have never shifted: NATO expansion and the so-called denazification of Ukraine. Moscow's continued posturing received short shrift from Ukraine, as well as its allies, with new sanctions announced against Russia today as EU foreign and defence ministers met in Brussels.
Yesterday's phone call once again confirmed that statements are being made by the Russian side, but so far there is no evidence of declared intentions. Putin is still not prepared to make any concessions. He is only talking about a ceasefire on his terms.
For Europe, Russia is an ongoing threat outside of Ukraine too. Recently, satellite images have shown Moscow building up its military infrastructure near to the Finnish border. And Brussels is still concerned about Russian election interference. Leaders were relieved that the centrist Nika Jordan won Romania's presidential election, defeating a hard-right nationalist rival who threatened to withdraw aid to Ukraine. But the defeated George Simeon had a warning: this fight was not over.
We lost this battle, but we didn't and will never lose our war.
The next battle is in Poland, where the Euro-friendly liberal Rafał Trzaskowski is hoping to triumph. While he won the first round, it was only narrowly, and he faces a close race next weekend. This is what worries Brussels. Standing to Putin's side just 2 weeks ago, Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico, as Russia celebrated Victory Day. An EU leader next to Ukraine's foe. This East versus West battle perhaps seen at its height in Georgia, where protests have taken place for months against the government. It was late last year when, following elections, a new prime minister was sworn in and announced he was halting accession talks with the EU. That drew the ire of the people and the then president Salome Zurabishvili, who claimed the elections were illegitimate because of alleged interference from Moscow. Her term came to an end last year, but she continues to warn about the threat of Russia as people take to the streets daily in Georgia.
Well, Salome Zurabishvili, the 5th president of Georgia, who you just saw there, joined me in the studio this afternoon. We started by discussing the complication of how for millions of Georgians she is still the legitimate president of her country and what she's now doing in opposition to the current government.
Well, what I've been doing, which is also very complicated, which is on one side to represent outside. That's the easiest part, I would say, the voice of the people, the situation in Georgia, to present what is happening. In those difficult conditions, we're still progressing. We have a resistance platform now that reunites 7 parties.
And do you see yourself very much at the front line of this, big division between the autocracy represented by Vladimir Putin and the democracy of the West, or what's left of the West?
Not only we are the front line in a way, but we are the other side of the coin of what is played today in Ukraine, which mobilizes the whole attention, and rightly so, because the fate of Ukraine is also very important and decisive for all of us, not only us. But we are the other side of the coin because in Georgia, like it did in 2008, today, with those elections and this proxy government practically, Russia is testing an alternate strategy to military intervention. Military intervention that has not worked so well in Ukraine.
And is very costly. In terms
it's very
of lives
costly.
And sanctions.
And prestige, everything. So now the attempt or the testing that is done, the experiment that is done in Georgia, is to see whether through democratic instruments you can also control a country. You can maybe take over a state. And that means you use elections, you use propaganda, you use new technologies, artificial intelligence, and many other things. You use all of that. That is not costly. And those are the things that an old KGB leader probably understands better than military affairs.
Of course, they would say this is the democratic vote of the people of Georgia. They elected a different kind of government. Suck it up, deal with it.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, but the Georgian people know better what has happened. They know it very well. They have seen it in Romania, and it was saved by the Constitutional Court. If you want to prevent that of happening in different countries, tomorrow in Ukraine, after the ceasefire, they will ask, Putin has already been asking for elections.
So what's been happening in your country, as you allege, Russian interference, underhand, influencing elections, you think that's quite possible that this will take place even in a sovereign and independent Ukraine that emerges from this war?
Well, the plans of Russia are very clear. Mr. Putin has been already saying it out loud that elections have to happen, they have to be democratic. When does he care about democratic elections? So what has been tested in Georgia is something that gives him ground. Because if you have to know that in Georgia there was never a pro-Russian part of Georgia. That doesn't exist because we have had too many experiences of... if it can happen in Georgia that Russian propaganda works, and I must admit that we made the big mistake of considering that it was not going to work. If that can work in Georgia, then it can even work better in other countries.
So you mentioned Romania, and of course we just had the election result there. The anti-Russian candidate, the mayor of Bucharest, won that election, and people had thought that actually that the pro-Russian candidate would win, and the election was of course cancelled.
I think that
that's good news, but Romania is part of the European Union.
Yeah, that's good. It didn't happen because it's part of the European Union. It happened because there was a sense of fear suddenly of realizing that this might happen. So that was a great relief for us too, because we are the countries around the Black Sea, and we all know that one of the objectives of Russia, even through the Ukraine war, is the Black Sea, is to control the Black Sea. So Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Georgia are essential.
Just to sum it up briefly then, if the West wants to find out, if Europe wants to find out what Russia will get up to next, they should keep a very close eye on Georgia.
It should not only keep a close eye, it should support the Georgian population in its rightful and peaceful demand for new elections, because that's what democracy is about. When there is, not only because rigged elections, but when there is a paralysis in a country, when there is a crisis that lasts for 6 months, when there is no way out, a way out for democracy is new elections. If that's not the way out, then we are in worst situations.
Madam President, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.